Hey everyone, I'm back with my wife's Toyota Sienna here. This is a 2013, 138,000 miles. We bought it new at the end of 2012. So a 12-year-old van, it has been flawless the entire time. We've done basic maintenance to it and it has run really, really well with no breakdowns, nothing like that. You have two heater cores in this vehicle, one in the front in the dash somewhere, and then one in the back above the right rear tire. But both of them, they get their coolant from the same place. So your coolant comes out of the engine, goes in two directions, one to the radiator, one back to the heater cores, and it goes into a T. One goes down underneath the vehicle to the back one goes straight in through the firewall to the front heater core. And then it comes back in and does the exact same thing, and then it all goes through the radiator and back into the engine. So I am going to flush those two cores in this vehicle, in this video, and then also there is a couple of servo motors that adjust the flow of air inside the vehicle. So I also had to change out the one on the driver's side. So we're in the driver's side, underneath the footwell by the gas pedal, you can see this big white gear right here. And then this is a servo motor with this plug right here. So it has a positive, a negative, and a control wire. This tells the motor what position to go to, and this gear here changes a flap from one direction to another. So in one direction, it's sending all the air through the air conditioner core to cool it down. In the other direction, it's sending it past the heater core to heat the air up. So this thing also was having issues. I don't know if it was completely seized up or broken, but it was not doing what it was supposed to do. So it did work in the AC mode. It was not sending any hot air. So really, check this first, because if that's it, your heater cores might not be the issue. But my van's 12 years old, so I wanted to do both. Anyway, there's two screws on that little thing in there. It's not very hard to do. That's in the video as well. But to get to the two T's that the coolant goes through, you've got to end up taking the entire air box, air intake out, and your battery out. So to do that, you have these two bolts here. You have another bolt right down there, and a fourth bolt right there. So once you get those bolts out, you also take a couple clips off. And that was one thing that you can see there's like some goo on here that holds these hoses in place. I didn't want to break that goo and get them out. So these two are the exact same clips. On the back, there's two little tabs. You can just pinch it and push that thing out. So I just ended up taking these clips out instead of taking the hoses out of the clips. But that was just my choice. There's also some sensors. This sensor here, you've got to disconnect. And there's a sensor on the mass air sensor right here, you got to disconnect. And then take this and that bracket off to get this hose out. And then you can pull this out, the battery comes out. And also I broke the bolt that holds the battery bracket on here, so I had to re-tap a new one. I would say if you're going to do this, spray some WD-40 or some sort of penetrating oil on this the day before and then the day of. And then also this just loosens up and then the whole battery comes out. Disconnect your negative first, then your positive. Pull the battery out, pull the intake out. That's what this video is going to be. If your heater's not blowing hot air, try this first. I think I spent a total of $100 to get this done. The motor inside on the driver's side was $60, the coolant was $20, and then I bought some brass tees to replace the plastic tees for about 20 bucks. Ended up not using them, but a lot of other people said when they took the hoses off those tees, they crumbled apart, fell apart. Mine were in great shape. They were not showing any signs of deterioration, so I put them right back in there and they're working great still. So there you go. Here comes the video. So when you look in here, it's really hard to see what we're doing, but there are these two hoses right down there, go to two T's behind the air intake. And those T's, everybody I've read about, actually you can see one of the little things. Everybody I've read about says they crumble apart when you take them out. So I bought two 3/4 inch brass T's that I'm going to use with some hose clamps. But first thing I got to do is take the intake out. So it's these two bolts here, and then there's one bolt down there, and then I've got to disconnect the actual intake or the hose here from the intake going into the engine. And then there's a couple different hoses that I've got to disconnect. So there's going to be a wire here for some sensors, and I'll figure it out as I go along what needs to come out. But I will show you all of them as I do it and let you know how hard this is. So it looks like a lot of it stays on here. So I know this wire is going to have to come off, but a lot of these different hoses and stuff are all integrated into the intake itself. So they should be able to stay on, but I'll let you know. All right, so these two bolts are 10 millimeter. Now these hoses, I'm not sure what they're connecting to, just different air, but they're like glued onto here. So I'm going to try to just take the entire brackets out. That way I can just snap them back in instead of taking each hose out and messing up that little bit of stuff there. So they come out pretty easy, just a pair of nail nose pliers, and then you can pinch the back of the clips. What else do we got here? Should just come out now, but it's kind of awkward shaped. There we go. Okay, well that is dirty and gross. There's like bees and bugs in there, nasty. All right, we'll just take this out, even though we're gonna take the whole thing out anyway. So I'm not even gonna disconnect these. When I take this off, I'm just gonna set it over on this side. So the less tubes you have to take off, the less chance you have of like breaking a hose or messing something else up. So there's a bolt right here below the positive battery terminal. There's a bolt right here on the driver's side. I don't see another one, so I'm going to take those two off and see if that loosens it enough to get this whole part out. This taken off. I am still determined to get this clip out of here. All right, I gave it a solid try, not happening. So we'll cut this zip tie. Well, I'll take the other part of that hose off, see if maybe that's part of it. So I don't know what this random box is off the side of here. It's just an empty thing that's not hooked up to anything. All right, I'll be honest. I've got everything loosened. I have no idea how to get this out of here. It just doesn't fit without taking the battery out, and I really don't want to do that. But it looks like I'm going to have to. So that's kind of a bummer. Well, that sucks. Battery's out. And this whole thing can just sit over here. I don't have to disconnect all those tubes. All right, so let's go through this. I would say the first thing you want to do when you're getting into here is come out with some WD-40 or penetrating oil and spray this bolt just to make sure you can loosen up that rust a little bit. And then you might as well just take the battery out before you do anything. So spray that, give it, 10, 20 minutes to settle in. Try to loosen it up. If you can't, I mean, it is what it is. Mine broke, it sucks. But I could get a tap and die kit and try to get it out of there. I might spray some penetrating oil on it now and just get a new bolt. And then the other side, you just loosen it just enough that it comes off the bottom of the tray there. The intake manifold itself, I ended up taking both sides of the tubing off. There's a clip back here for the mass air sensor. There was another clip over on this side. I'll just have to find it when I put everything back together. It was on this side right there. So there's only two wires that you've got to disconnect. Your mass air sensor and then some sort of sensor over here. I don't know what that one's for. But now that we have access in here, so you're looking at the engine bay, you come in here and you've got these two T's right here. You got one right here and another right there. So these are going, two of the lines are coming off and going back down underneath the vehicle into the back heater core. And then two of the other lines are going right in here to the heater core inside the vehicle. All right, so I got a cup in there. Let some of this fluid that's just, it's basically just the fluid that's in the hose coming down because it goes down on the other side too. So it's just gravity sending a little bit down right now. Still some leaking out of there. So we'll just give it a minute. Save as much as we can. It looks really clean, so that's a really good thing. All right, so mine didn't fall apart, but I'm still going to replace it because this thing's 12 years old. and I don't want to deal with a broken one, especially since I have brass ones to put right back in there. So good shape. This is a 2013, 138,000 miles on it, and they were not broken at all. So we'll see what happens here. All right, for prosperity's sake, I'm taking a video so I can see what is where. So the hose that's on the far side here goes to the hose that comes out on the top from the water pump or the engine, and then the hose on the right, which goes down to the right. So top, right, and bottom. Freaking A, man. It's craziness. Okay. Top from the engine, bottom going into the front area, and then right. So I'm actually going to write this down. So let's see here. We've got top from motor, bottom to firewall. So this is T1. So top from the engine, bottom going into the firewall, which is crazy, and then the right side, right under fan. All right, so I'm gonna keep this, make sure I have it for later when I gotta put all this stuff back together, and now it's time to continue on. So now I've gotta get the other one without spilling too much coolant, or any coolant if I can avoid it. All right, so I've got the first T disconnected. I've got this 1/2 inch inner diameter hose. This is a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch, basically a butt connector with just a hose clamp on it. So I'm gonna tie this into one side to drain into a bucket. And then on the other side, I've got my hose with this connector. Basically, that's another, this is actually a 5/8 inner diameter of plastic, because the 3/4 inch plastic is a whole lot bigger than the 3/4 inch brass. I don't understand the differences, but a 5-inch connector connected to a hose that's connected to just a valve that I can work right here next to the van, because you don't want to go over 10 psi inside of the heat exchanger, or whatever it's called. It's not made for the, you know, the 60 or 80 psi that you might have at your house coming out of the hose. So you got to just very slowly do it. If you don't see anything coming out when you're turning it on, don't overdo it. Turn it off, go the other direction. And if you have to, put a little bit of like radiator cleaner fluid in there and let it sit for a while. So we're going to see what happens here. It looks like it's about to thunderstorm. So I'm going to work on getting the other T off of there and drained out. I'm sure you can't see over my shoulder here, but I'm just getting these clamps off. These hoses haven't moved in 13 years, so they're definitely happy being where they are. All right, so this one's starting to come out. I'm going to get my cup ready, because this is going to be another good spot for it to drain a bunch. All right, so I got the other one out too. So both of them are out. Now I can just hook up my hoses and start flushing. All right, so I've got my hose set up here. I flushed it out. I can do a little bit, all the way up to a lot. I won't go that high, but I have my valve right here, so I can just kind of get it set. So now I'm going to hook this one up. Probably bring enough hose over so that this can be resting up here. So this hose here, this is the hose coming off of the engine. It's tied into the same thing that goes to the top of the radiator. So I'm guessing, because there's also a sensor here for the thermostat, I'm guessing that this is the hot side. So this is the side that would be going into the core and then out the other way. We want to reverse flush it. So what I did is, this hose here is the bottom of the two going into the firewall. This is where the hot water goes in. So I have this as my tube, as my flow out. And I have my hose hooked up to the other side, which is going to the top, going in through the firewall. So we're going to be pushing water the opposite direction that the water pump pushes hot water in. We're going to be pushing it the other way. So anything that's going up against those holes that was blocking it gets pushed back out and comes out through here. I've got my bucket. This might block your view, but I'm not going to make a huge mess here. So, and you've seen how it's hooked up. So now I'm just going to turn this on very slowly. So we've got coolant coming out. Just doing this nice and slow. It's really good, clean coolant coming out too, which is a good thing. But I would have expected a whole bunch of Something's leaking here. All right, so that's a lot of water going through there right now. Pretty solid flow. You can see very clear, clean water coming out now. I'm gonna turn it off. Get my pliers and disconnect that. I'm gonna do it the other way now. So I'm gonna switch these two, and I'm also gonna do the back side of this. All right, so now I'm gonna switch the hose to the side that was coming out of. All right, so we'll do the same thing. It should just be coming out clear from the very beginning. See water coming out. It rained a little bit. All right, so that's flushed. All right, so now I'm going to take this pressure hose from the one going to the firewall to the one going underneath the vehicle to the rear heat exchange. We'll do this whole process again. Okay, so now I'm hooked up to the two hoses that go down to the back heater core. So I'm going to bring my bucket back up. And I think I'm going in the same direction now, but we're getting coolant coming out. And now I'm going to swap directions, flush it the other way. All right. That's already coming out. So really, I think we're done. All right, so we're done with the pressurized water. So what I'm going to try to do now is I've still got these hooked up. I'm going to use a funnel, just use gravity to try to force new coolant in until I see coolant coming out. So I have a gallon of coolant, and you got to make sure you have the right kind. So this is the pink Asian vehicle coolant. I don't know how well this is going to work, but we're just going to try it. All right, so I'm still just pouring coolant in the hose here. All right, and I got pink water in the clear hose, or coolant in the clear hose coming out now. So that's all we needed for that. Now I've got to get that T back on both sides actually. So, oh man, I'm gonna take a break with all this rain. All right, so I'm putting the same T's back on there. They're not broken, they're not brittle, and I know they don't leak. I was getting a lot of water and stuff leaking past this brass fitting, and it's the same size as the one I was planning on using, so I don't really want to mess with that and have it get all hosed up here. So let's see, I've got to take this out. Now all I got to do is put all those little pipe clamps back where they go, then get everything back reinstalled here, the intake and everything, and then fire it up and see if it actually works and add coolant as required. I don't think it should take too much coolant because I refilled the entire one going to the back, and the front didn't take a whole lot, and it has water in there. It'll flush out and then mix in and it'll be fine. So I'm just gonna get my pliers, move all those hose clamps back into place. So as I put everything back in there, I've got to get everything hooked up. So this plugs into the intake, and this plugs into the intake. And then I've got a couple of hoses that plug into the intake, and this hose is kind of cracked on the outside, but it should be good enough. It's just a airline, nothing crazy. So the hard part is going to be getting this thing back in there the way it goes, just because it's a serious pain. But you will see that you got this little nubby right here. I don't know if you can see, yeah, nubby here, and you've got this white thing right here. So this is going to go down into there. So when you're taking it out, you get these two bolts out. Then you really got to put your finger back there and push it up, or or at least that's what I did, and it made it really easy. So now I'm gonna do the same thing, make sure, yep, I'm lined up, and I'm just gonna push it down in there, so that's good. And then these holes actually line up perfectly right now. So I'm not gonna tighten it in because I wanna be able to move it around to get this hose back in there. So I don't know what the heck this thing is. It's hollow, there's nothing in it, there's no sensors going to it. It's just an empty thing, like it's supposed to be for maybe, I don't know why they just didn't put a plug in there. It's like a certain volume of air. Makes no sense to me. It's just strange. So anyway, gonna get this put back in there. Now I'm gonna put this back on the intake. Make sure it seats all the way around. There we go, all the way in. And before I forget, I'm gonna tighten these two just to be sure I'm doing them as I go. So these are both 10 millimeter. And that can't move anymore, so I think that's probably good enough. You don't want to overdo it. You're just tightening onto plastic on this side, so you could end up cracking something. That seems pretty tight on there as well. This guy just pushes in there with that little clip. This goes on here, and it's super easy to get this thing. You can just do it with your fingers. So we're just about put back together here. All right, time to put the battery back in, and I'll figure out how to secure it. Still pretty frustrated by this whole situation. I'm going to add coolant just because, well, it's dirty. Not really. Just because. We've got a bunch. All right, we are almost to the full line. It's freaking hot and miserable out here, and I'm about to get in there and turn the heater on full blast, so that's going to suck. All right, we'll let it run for a second. All right, we got no leaks, nothing crazy like that. And I think the reason it started and died, when I pulled one of the hoses off, there was a vacuum. There was definitely some pressure that got lost. When I plugged it back in, I think it had to recreate that vacuum, and that's why it started and shut off and then started back up. So AC is still blowing cold. If you watched that previous video of fixing the compressor control valve, AC is still great in this thing, and it is freaking hot out. It's like 95 degrees. It's gonna be even hotter tomorrow and the next day. So, gonna check the heater now. All right, so it's nothing but cold air coming out of there right now. So I think the issue could also be there's some flapper valves that are supposed to open and close. Feels like it's actually air conditioned air. All right, so I spent about the last 3 hours flushing out clean heater cores. Turns out the issue is the actual, what do they call this? The vent actuator or HVAC air actuator. This is on the driver's side. So the one on the passenger side, it opens and closes a lever that sends air up to the vents in the dash or down to the vents at your feet. And this one actually opens and closes a door to have the air pass through the heater core or over the AC condenser. So this part is, I got it for $47 at Napa. You can get it from Toyota for $215. It comes with the gear. You can get it from O'Reilly's for like $200, $150 with the gear. From O'Reilly's, it's $40 without the gear. To get the gear off, I want to show you up close. So you can see from this, oh, geez, you can see from this one, it's like a half round shape to it. It's got that little notch in there. So what you do to get this thing out, I'm going to zoom in so you can actually see. So the way I found to do it, there's a little tab and you push it away from the half circle shape. And the way I did it, which worked really well, was take two screwdrivers, two flathead screwdrivers, one to push that thing away and the other one to actually kind of pry it up, and then it just pops right off. And this is the old one. I actually already took this thing apart to see what's inside of it, and I'll show you that in a second. But to put this thing on the old one, or onto the new one, basically you just line up the two things, and you'll hear it. Once you push it down, it snaps. So now it's in there. And you'll see there's one big set of teeth on it. So there's one big tooth, and that's the key, and it goes into a big gap in the van. So I'll show you that. And it's only 2 screws that hold this thing in. So really, I spent 3 hours doing what I could have done in about 10 minutes. So I'm a little frustrated, but it's always fun to wrench on your car. It didn't cost me too much, just 20 bucks for antifreeze that I didn't really need. And then, you know, a couple other little things. But I want to show you the inside of this, just to show you how simple it really is. So it's basically, it's just a motor with, let's see, is it focusing or not? Okay, here we go. So what's in this thing is a whole bunch of reduction gears. So the motor is going to spin this thing, and it slowly spins that, which goes to the output here, which has the other gear on it. So the motor sits right in here, and it's got these 2 little tabbies that go into the connectors, and then it just has this. So it slowly spins, or it probably spins pretty quick, but it's kind of hard to actually make it spin. But anyway, this spins and slowly moves this left to right. There's 5 pins here, but there's 3 lines coming into this. There's a positive, a ground, and then a control module. So basically, this thing, it goes through some circuitry, and then it will tell this motor what position to go to. So the fact that it's keyed, it's got to be in a certain position, and it basically senses the temperature that you're asking for, and then it knows if it needs to, you know, open all the way to hot, all the way to cold, or somewhere in the middle. So I'm going to go throw this back in the car right now, in the van, and see if it works. I'm hoping it does, because if this isn't it, then I've got some other electrical issues, and I don't even want to think about that. Okay, so we're in the driver's side. This is obviously this is where the pedals are, so I don't need to explain that. But the gear is right there. That's what we're going to tie into. You can see the big slot right there for where the key part goes, where the big thick tooth goes. So I am going to take this thing and put it in there and hope for the best. So it's only 2 screws, top right, bottom left, and then good to go. So now that you've seen, I might not be able to do it with the camera in here. I'll try my best. I want to be able to show you what it is that I'm doing, but the camera might be in the way of me getting this done before my wife has to go to my daughter's volleyball game. All right. Just trust me that I'm putting it in there. I'll show you again in a second. Okay, that was an absolute pain to get. So I got the bottom screw. All right, so let me get my screwdriver here. What I did is I put this bottom screw in loose, and then I pulled the thing away, pushed this thing up until it lined up, pushed it back, tightened this screw, got the top screw. Now I'm going to start the truck or the van and switch it back and forth and see what happens. Right now, it's just the AC going. I'm going to switch it to heat. It's moving. All right, so it rotated all the way, which is fantastic. And now, well, the car's not even warmed up, so it's hard to tell, but it moved. Yes, that's all I wanted. All right, so now we're gonna see, I know the heater cores are clean. I know there's hot coolant flowing through there. And
Hi.
Hi, I'm fixing the heater.
I know.
Okay,